Hi, everyone. Amy Goyer here. I am AARP's family and caregiving expert, and I moderate AARP's family caregivers discussion on Facebook. If you've not already joined the group, please do join us. It is a place where caregivers can share their support for each other and problem solve and vent, and we all get through it together there. My special guest today for our chat is Deanna Vigliotta. She knows so much about a topic that is one of the most common topics in our caregiving Facebook group, and that is incontinence. It's something that most caregivers have to deal with sooner or later over time. And so I invited Deanna to join us and discuss this kind of taboo topic that it shouldn't be taboo. It's because it's something that we all deal with. Now, Deanna is the co-host of a podcast called Continence Chat. It's a podcast about incontinence, and which she interviews a variety of experts, caregivers, and business owners, sharing stories about their often very difficult subject matter in a safe, casual, and uplifting environment. Continence Chat strives to make an uncomfortable conversation more comfortable again. She's also the national sales manager at TZMO USA Inc., which features semi-incontinence products. So Deanna, please join us. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me. I really appreciate it. Anytime there's an opportunity to help serve as a resource, I'm grateful. So thank you.
Yes. I have to tell you folks, Deanna and I had a conversation planning for our chat, and I was just like, oh yeah, I got the right person here. And Deanna makes this topic, she really does make it more comfortable to talk about and very matter of fact. So thank you so much, Deanna, for being able to do this today with us. So let's start first of all with your own caregiving experience. We really like to start with that because we are primarily family caregivers watching these discussions, and we know that you've had caregiving experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, what's interesting is way back when I was probably about 15, 16, 17 years old, from a paid caregiver up in Massachusetts, one of my very first jobs was as a nurse's aide. At that time, they didn't call them certified nurses' aides, but I worked in a nursing home. So I feel like I'm coming full circle to some degree. Most recently, which has given me great empathy for probably a lot of your viewers out there, unfortunately, in October of 2024, my healthy 54-year-old fit husband unexpectedly, within 3 days, lost his vision 100% due to an unknown autoimmune disease. And so for the last 6.5 months, we have been adapting as a couple. But when that started, I became instantly no choice involved, which I know so many family caregivers, you don't have a choice, right? Something happens and all of a sudden you find yourself in those shoes. So being able to dispense meds every hour, I remember having a paper chart and just trying to get through the day, doing the cooking, the cleaning, the stress, the everything that comes with it. It gives me great empathy for caregivers who are caring for loved ones. I'm probably one of the lucky ones because my husband has his faculties and my husband is able to shower and shave and bathe. So those tasks are not under my umbrella, but I share my story because I can never claim, I don't think any of us can walk in the shoes of each other because every circumstance is different and unique. But do I think there's a whole lot of common ground of all the emotions that go with caregiving? I do. And so I'm grateful here to hopefully help people that do need some help and resources in terms of the incontinence part of it. But that's my story, still adapting. My husband is amazing, and we look forward to medical breakthroughs done in the future. We have hope, and that's what we hang on to. And I encourage everybody to get up in the morning and just a day at a time, a day at a time, a day at a time, and look for the positive pockets of joy that come a day at a time.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm so sorry you and your husband are going through this. Sometimes caregiving is just so incredibly unexpected, and we are not prepared for it. And it's hard to be prepared in any way for caregiving. And the topic we're dealing with today, incontinence, is one that, again, when we think about, oh, I may have to help mom as she gets older, it's not always the thing we realize that we're going to be dealing with. So let's just dive into that topic. We're talking about incontinence, bladder incontinence, bowel incontinence. It's, again, I mentioned it's like a taboo topic. So, you can only talk about it to other people who get it, but it really shouldn't be so taboo because it is a private thing. And so we need to maintain people's dignity and be respectful and careful about it. And at the same time, it's so incredibly common. And so should be something we can talk about matter-of-factly. It is also sometimes very unpleasant. Sometimes, the smells and the fact of dealing with feces and, those things I know from my own experience caring for my family members was really one of the hardest things for me to deal with as well. So we're going to talk about it and we're going to be open about it. So it's a practical issue and we're going to approach it that way. So let's start by asking, how common is incontinence? Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, it's becoming more common as people are living longer and living longer with more chronic conditions. So the prevalence in the U.S. is about 25 million people of all ages that have some level of incontinence. Some people may have light incontinence, some may have moderate, and some may have heavy or severe, which is really measured by the amount of urine that's voided over a 4-hour period. So, but about 25 million people, more women, about 60% of those folks are women versus men, and it's growing. The dementia demographic, folks that have dementia, that's a growing demographic, people with Alzheimer's. So we know that incontinence is following suit. But there's also children with special needs that may be incontinent, people with Parkinson's. There's a wide variety of reasons. So it is common. It's not a normal part of aging. People sometimes think it's normal part of aging, and it's not normal. It's just common. There's usually a reason why someone becomes incontinent, but it's common.
Something happens in the body that causes it. I saw one statistic from the National Institute of Health saying that caregivers report 53% of people who are homebound are incontinent, and about 75% of people who are in nursing homes are experiencing incontinence. So it is those of us, especially who are caring more intensively for loved ones, it's a more and more common situation. You mentioned dementia, and we know that people who have dementia often eventually experience incontinence because of the nervous system breaking down and the brain signals and all of those things being off. So let's talk about the different types of incontinence. First of all, we got urinary incontinence. What are the different types of urinary incontinence? And people may be surprised to know that there are different types of urinary incontinence.
Yeah. So we typically share that there are 4 or 5 different types of urinary incontinence. One of them is the most common is called stress incontinence. And an example of that may be when somebody coughs or sneezes or laughs, that they have an involuntary release of urine because of that act. Jumping up and down could be another reason why stress, but it's the most common type. And then there's another type of incontinence that's called urge incontinence. And that's when your brain is saying, I gotta go, and I've got to go now. And so when you think of people at all ages, but especially someone maybe who's an older adult who has arthritis, and maybe their legs just don't work the way that they used to, they might struggle to get there. It could be urge there. Overflow incontinence. An example of that would be the bladder maybe filling up for a certain reason, as males, for example, that may have an enlarged prostate, and that prostate is now pressing on that bladder. So that bladder feels like that they have to go. And then there's also what we call mix. Someone may have different, one or two different types for varied reasons. So there's stress, there's urge, there's mixed. Functional is, I gave the example that could be urge, but it could also be functional of my legs just don't work, or maybe my fingers, right? Maybe I have my faculties, I have to use the toilet and I have to go, but I'm having difficulty unbuttoning my pants to be able to go. So different reasons why. So 4 or 5 is typical of the different types of urinary incontinence.
Mm-hmm. And some people, especially as we get older, may be more prone to some of those. And then there's people who have complete urinary incontinence, who just never can make it to the bathroom. I know my mom used to struggle because she would have a sense she needed to go, but by the time she got to the bathroom, it was gone. She just couldn't control it. And she had a stroke, which affected her abilities, and as well as, a hysterectomy and other physical functional things that I think were impeding, perhaps in different ways. Sometimes people have my grandmother's bladder prolapsed, and so it's coming out, and that, or is that the bladder or the uterus prolapse? Anyway, there's a prolapse that happens.
It's the bladder, I think.
Yeah, and it causes that functional incontinence because it's literally coming out of the body. So then people sometimes have operations that help. I've had family members who've had a sling to hold things in place better. That can help. And I've had, there are various things that can be done. And for women, I know, experience in our family, a urogynecologist has been very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of specialize in incontinence issues for women.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know that there's a counterpart for men, but a urologist is generally a specialist who you can go to find out, okay, why is this happening? The other thing I wanted to mention is, and I don't know which category this would fit in, but when you have interstitial cystitis or you have a UTI, a urinary tract infection, you can have that constant urge. I guess it's the urge incontinence. It's always kind of that burning, that feeling like you've got to go. Right. And that's something else that you can talk with the doctor about. Sometimes with that interstitial cystitis, that feeling of like, oh, burning, maybe I have a UTI, but you don't. That can sometimes, in our family's experience, that some dietary changes like staying away from caffeine might help, or some other things like that, right?
Yeah, good point, Amy. And the other thing is you could have too, your bladder could be completely functional, intact, very healthy, but someone with dementia may have neurocognitive decline that says, hey, my brain can no longer talk to my bladder, and that causes incontinence because it just it's not working there, the connection.
Yeah, the signal doesn't get to the body and say, this is what you need to do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and we're going to get into some ideas about, how to manage things better. But the other type of incontinence I wanted us to address is bowel incontinence. So dealing with fecal incontinence. And it truly is a deal breaker for many caregivers. That's the thing I can't deal with. And for many, it's something that comes and goes. For example, my mom developed C. diff in the hospital, and that causes horrible, uncontrollable diarrhea. and she wasn't normally incontinent of bowel, but when someone gets that type of a disease and a process that causes that diarrhea, they just can't hold it in the body. The body wants to clear. So that can happen. But there's also sometimes people who get to a point where they, and sometimes with dementia, other things where they do have bowel incontinence. Any tips for dealing with that?
I think a tip could be, which most people know their loved one intimately. So it could be trying to have a timed bowel movement type of thing, maybe would be one suggestion for someone who's regular that doesn't have an issue that's causing, diarrhea or so forth. And then my other suggestion would be, if your loved one is using a type of incontinence products, I know our company, for example, has what they call a booster pad, and our philosophy is not to use inserts or liners, except for this one booster pad that can help contain fecal incontinence and make it easier for that caregiver. You want to change it as soon as it happens. But between, I'm just thinking out loud, time voiding, using a product that's at least going to minimize the waste there. Those would be a couple of my tips. And sometimes too, reviewing, right? If all of a sudden someone has a loved one at home and all of a sudden they're having diarrhea, why? Really digging into the weeds of why. Is it a new medication and it's a side effect? Has something changed with time of day of eating, drinking different foods, all those different things. So reviewing what's going in, reviewing what's going out, and then trying to use the bathroom as much as possible, those types of things.
And in my experience, both professionally and personally, in caring for people, especially people with dementia, the tendency for urinary incontinence tends to come first, and much further on, potentially bowel incontinence. But sometimes they have the urge and are more aware they need to use the toilet, but they can't communicate it. So that's where understanding the signals. I remember my grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, and in the very advanced stages, she would start fidgeting. And that was when, we knew that she needed to have a bowel movement. Whereas urinary, she wouldn't give any kind of signals at all. But you had to know that was the signal. Right. So watch your loved ones, try to stay on a schedule. That's an interesting point about an extra booster pad to help contain, because that is one of the problems. The pads can soak up urine, but what about, a large bowel movement? And if it's not well formed, it may not stay inside the brief. Correct.
Yeah. That's a good point that you bring up too, Amy, about just knowing signals and understanding your loved one intimately, of doing the best you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go through some common myths and facts about incontinence. The first one is that it only concerns the elderly. Is that a myth or a fact?
That is definitely a myth. Absolutely. A lot of older adults do have incontinence, but again, it's typically caused by other chronic conditions that they have. And as we age older, we tend to have more chronic conditions. But unfortunately, there's a whole spectrum of people of all ages that could be incontinent. People with spina bifida, people with Parkinson's, children with different special needs, autism, pregnant woman, another good one. Just lots and lots of varied people that can have incontinence. So it's not just an older demographic; it's just more common there. But definitely a big population. Many reasons why.
All right. So here's another one. Is urinary incontinence a disease? Is that a fact? It is a disease, or fact or myth?
That would be myth too. So it absolutely is not a disease. And it's not something that is guaranteed not to be incurable. It's a condition. So urinary incontinence is a condition. And by sometimes trying to manage incontinence better by putting some strategies in place, you can actually reduce the level of incontinence that a person has. And what I mean by that, someone who maybe has moderate incontinence, maybe a review of their medicines may lead that, gee, they're no longer incontinent, or maybe they have light incontinence, so they've gone back in a positive direction. That's just one example. So no, it is not a disease. It is a condition, and there are ways to improve a level of incontinence for people by different strategies.
Mm-hmm. And also another thing to remember is diuretics. A lot of people take diuretics for heart issues, and that can also cause that urge more frequently. The body, it's just got more fluids to expel. And so it might be that adjusting the schedule for the medication can help in nighttime incontinence, for example, or adjusting, how much medication you take and things like that. So here's another one. And you mentioned this, but I'm going to bring it up anyway.
Okay.
Is this a fact or fiction? Urinary incontinence is more common in women than men.
That is true. That is true. I think I mentioned early on about 60% of those who are incontinent as adults tend to be women. And that has to do with just our anatomy, but also things like women giving birth, someone who gives birth to multiple children. It's not that giving birth was the cause of incontinence. It could be that those pelvic floor muscles become weakened. And so now there's pressure there, and that can lead to some level of incontinence as one example. So it is more common in women than it is in men.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. What about this? Putting on an absorbent product, such as a disposable brief, isn't difficult. Fact or myth?
Well, I would say as a whole, I would say that would be that it isn't difficult would be
maybe it's a little bit of both, right?
It can be, everybody's unique. And the biggest thing here would be to understand, should the person that I'm caring for, or should I be wearing a brief, or should I be wearing a pull-up? There are reasons why people wear briefs, why people wear pull-ups, why people don't wear either. Maybe they wear what's called a shaped pad that goes on a different way with supporting pants. So difficulty can sometimes be lack of education about a style of a product, proper fit. Someone who is active, they're probably going to fare better in a pull-up. Someone who is more immobile may fare better in a brief. But someone who is immobile and has severe arthritis, depending on where the arthritis is located, that may be painful and difficult for someone to change. And they may fare better in what we call a shaped pad, which is the core of a brief, all the properties that someone can wear in their own underwear. So, and then education of how to properly put the product on, movement of the person, opening up inner leak guards, how you're adjusting the tabs. So there's a lot there to diffuse. So the key to me is education all the way around on that one.
So does your organization offer some videos or anything that helps people see the correct way to put these things on?
We do, actually. Our seni-usa.com website is super informative. Our YouTube channel, if they go to the website, they can click on our YouTube channel, and there's lots of videos of how to properly put a product on, and vary products as well.
Right. Because it seems like you look at them, you think, well, this isn't so difficult. I can just figure out how to do this. But sometimes there are tips and tricks that make a big difference. And AARP also has some great videos on incontinence that I'll be sharing all of these links in the comments below. So be sure and check there so you can get a little more education on it. All right, here's another one.
All right.
Myth or fact? The bladder capacity is 3 liters.
I would say that one is myth. Everybody has different capacities and voiding habits and so forth. I know we get a lot of questions when it comes to incontinence products. How much does it hold? How much does it hold? And people want us to, know that it holds a gallon, for it to work, so forth and so on. We measure, and I think it's important to measure, we measure incontinence light, moderate, and heavy incontinence. And I'm going to talk about heavy real briefly, because I think a lot of people that are caring for loved ones at home who have dementia and who are older adults tend to lean on the heavy side. But 7 ounces or more of urine voided in a 4-hour period is considered heavy incontinence. And so, well, what does that mean? If you looked at a water bottle, a traditional water bottle that was 16.9 ounces of water, someone who has heavy incontinence would mean that through the night, 1/2 of that bottle, which would be 8 ounces, so I say 7 ounces or more, think of that as one void. And then think of another void through the night, finishing up that water bottle. That 16.9 water bottle, if someone's voiding that much at night, that would be a person what we would consider has heavy incontinence.
So it really varies per person. 3 liters is probably way too much. I don't, that's a myth that's out there, but certainly it varies on what people, how much urine they have, and they one of the things, and we can talk about this later, but we often try to limit drinking fluids so there won't be as much going to the bathroom or incontinence. The problem with that is then people get dehydrated. And so, I saw a study recently saying, it doesn't make that much difference how early you stop drinking water at night, which I thought was very interesting in terms of voiding. I thought it was very interesting because that's certainly something I've been told for many years. And you have to kind of experiment with it yourself. But the body, but if you think about going to the bathroom, another tips my doctor told me was go to the bathroom twice before you go to bed. Not just once, and go brush your teeth and everything, and then go again, because there's always a little bit more, maybe, to get to void and get out of the system for the night.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. My mind's going.
Lots of clips, and I encourage all of you who are watching to write in the comments. What have you learned? What works for you and your loved one? What has your doctor told you? What doesn't work? What do you find is not a good tip? So here's another one. An incontinent person shouldn't travel.
Well, that is 100% myth. Myth all day long. People that have, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers are going through this, unfortunately, people that have incontinence can feel that way, maybe like, ooh, I don't want to go out. What if something embarrassing happens? And, people that have their faculties could be thinking that, right? But also people that are incontinent that don't have their faculties could have a caregiver, spouse, son, daughter that may think, I don't want to take mom out because, gee, what would happen if she has it, or he or she has an accident? We've seen the bright light shine during COVID about the ill effects of social isolation and how that leads to depression. And so the key, in my opinion, is absolutely travel. The key is to manage continence care and different strategies. Everybody's unique, different, but whether it's doing things differently, whether it's going to the bathroom more frequently when someone is out, whether it's using a different type of product that someone feels confident that's going to work. But yeah, travel is healthy and travel reduces the risk of social isolation and depression and negative clinical things, even physical things. You think of it when you go out, travel may be visually, we're going to go out and see, but you may also go out and walk, right? That's a physical exercise and aspect to it. So socialization, physical activity, traveling and trying different foods, different play, it all goes full circle.
Yeah. I know one of the things that the last few times I took my parents on trips, my mom had dealt with incontinence for years. And I actually fit into an airplane bathroom with my mom to help her with her pads and all her stuff. Don't even ask me how I look back at that now. I was like, how did we even do this? But, I helped her get everything set up and we did it. It's like, do what you have to do, but having extra supplies, being prepared. So even going to a doctor appointment, I kept a full set of clothing in the trunk for both my parents, including shoes, because there were times when the incontinence would be so strong it would go down and get into their shoes and socks. So I just kept that in a bag in the trunk always, just in case. And there were a couple times I needed to use some of those items of clothing, and extra incontinence supplies I kept, in the trunk of the car. So wherever we went, I could always get to the car, or I could ask someone to go and get something, that type of thing. Having extra on hand gives you a whole lot more peace of mind and confidence about going out and dealing with life.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up, Amy, too, that some airports, not all, but people can look online, actually have adult family changing rooms. And that, to me, just knowing, being educated about what are the resources, where are you going? And then my other little tip that I would share with people, if you are traveling with a loved one or you yourself are sitting in an airplane seat and you have an accident, don't be afraid to call that attendant over. You would be surprised how sometimes certain airlines, they will carry some stock of products to help people avoid that embarrassing situation. So I think most people want to help one another. So the key is to speak up and make sure that you're taken care of.
And the other thing you can do is carry disposable, seat covers, pads that you might use on a bed or a chair at home. You can use the fold up disposable ones. Just have one of those. And if you're going to be in a long air flight and you're really concerned, the embarrassment of putting that out is not as bad as the embarrassment of the floor, everything being soaked with urine.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to weigh your challenges, right?
Right. Good point. Yes.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the family restrooms. That was one thing I did where, I took care of my parents in Arizona, and in the summers it was very, very hot. So to get any exercise or get out and do anything, we needed to go to the mall where it was cooler. Yeah. And so I would have the valet parking guy help us get them out of the car and the walker and the wheelchair and all the accoutrements. But I knew where the family restroom was in that mall. Yeah. And so I could help both mom and dad. Dad was at that time more his visual challenges, couldn't see the toilet very well. Mom could help with all the incontinence supplies, all of those things. And that makes a huge, huge difference. But I'm telling you what, there were times when I just went in the men's room with my dad and I said, I'm coming in to help my dad. And I tried to wait till it was empty. And then if someone came in, I'd holler out. And sometimes they'd be like, I don't care. And they just go do their business. And sometimes wait. But, sometimes people understand when they see the situation. And it's amazing how many people are helpful in those situations.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree.
All right. So here's another one.
Yeah.
Does exercise may restore control over one's bladder?
Yes. I mean, Kegel exercises. I think people hear the word, have heard the word, Kegel, but I think the younger people that really get into a habit of doing Kegel exercises. You're tightening up your pelvic floor, your muscles. So yes, exercising can help bladder control based on the individual and based what other factors are in play there for sure.
Yep. So the earlier you start doing, the better. So this caregivers, listen for yourself too. And also, I know that was a challenge with my mom after her stroke because she had a hard time understanding exactly what she was to do. And we worked with the urogynecologist to have diagrams, and he had little things and he could show how you do the exercises and that type of thing. And you can also work with a pelvic floor therapist, which insurance most of the time will cover if you're suffering some incontinence issues. And they can help you also with certain stretches and the Kegel exercises and other things that can help with that continence.
Yeah. And I was just going to add too, exercises like we were talking about with Kegel, but also exercise and where exercise can help. You could have an example of a person maybe who is overweight. And so if that weight is around the middle of their habitus, and again, pressing on the pelvic floor, someone who exercises loses some of the weight, and that can help manage continence better too. So two words, kind of the same word, but can mean two different things, but they both help.
And that would be a type of a functional incontinence when there's so much weight on the bladder?
It could be. It could be functional. I'm thinking it could be stress because you have the weight and therefore you could cause. So it could be a variety, I think, based on the person and the scenario. I'm going to say mixed. That's when we go to mixed, if it can go somewhere across one or the other.
Very, very good point. Okay, here's another one. Incontinence makes it impossible to maintain hygiene.
That is a myth. That is a myth. And I can imagine that a lot of people that are caring for loved ones with incontinence could be on this, could be listening to us saying, not in my house, that's truth. But if you use good products, and I mean not just good briefs or pull-ups, but good wipes, good barrier creams, good moisturizing lotion, everything on the proactive side to keep that loved one's skin in the best condition that it can be in. You can absolutely have good hygiene for your loved one who is incontinent. Absolutely.
And that kind of leads to the next one, which is a bedridden person can't avoid developing bed sores.
So a bedridden person, as it relates directly to having urinary incontinence, there are other medical conditions that could cause bed sores. I always say in 2025, urinary incontinence should not be causing skin breakdown. When people understand that using a fully breathable product, a product that has a wicking system that removes urine away from the skin quickly and locks it into place, when a product has inner leak guards, when a product is made of soft nonwovens, all the features of a high quality product alleviates that risk of skin breakdown. So a bedridden person, if their only condition was urinary incontinence, no, they should not have bed sores if people understand the importance of using a high quality product and associated supplies that work.
This is a topic again in the group that comes up a lot. And what do you use to protect that skin? Some of the things that people talk about are the barrier creams. I know for my mom, I used a lanolin based product, and that kept the moisture. It worked really well for her. But for my dad, he was allergic to it. In it, he was sensitive to it. So we found other products. And in fact, the wound care nurse who would come for home care was really excellent at this. And she would give me all these different options. And so we eventually found things that worked and really kept that to a minimum. The other thing was we used the silver, colloidal silver ointments, and we had a cloth that had silver into the cloth that we could tuck into the folds of the skin. So if the tummy's hanging over and it's getting damp, then that helped protect that from developing not just bed sores but yeasty and fungal infections and that type of thing. So in the comments, please, all of you who are watching, post your comments about what has helped you, what's worked for you and your loved one, what your doctors told you, all of those things. Because we often need, like I said, one thing worked great for my mom, but didn't work great for dad. So I needed new ideas. And so we often have to go through several products before we find what works.
Yeah, I was going to say, the company that I'm with, Seni, we're on the proactive side that if you use good products with quality features of the products, the way they're constructed, and good skincare. So we're not on the fix side of skincare, but we've got just 3 products. One is a moisturizing lotion, and it's any body part. It's just that simple, proactive to keep the skin moisturized. And then we have, nurses love it. You mentioned nurses. It's a Seni Care body care cream. And people will say to us, is that a barrier cream? And we'll say, yes, it's a transparent barrier cream. It's not the zinc that a lot of people use to fix the white zinc. Nurses love it because they can see what's going on in the skin, but it's a protectant that is just a barrier layer, transparent, in between changes, that again is just a proactive body care cream. And then our other one would be a no water needed Seni cleansing cream, and that is a product that can be used in between changes, or you might have someone who for varied reasons, maybe they've got a bug and they're in bed and they can't have a shower, but again, we want to maintain good hygiene. That would be a product that would have an application there as well. So just 3 on that.
Is it important to clean in between? So when a person uses the toilet, let's say they're using pull-ups, you replace the pull-up, which is wet. Is it important to clean that whole groin area in order to prevent having problems? Or if it seems like it's dry, do you leave it?
I think it's important to clean the area. The key is, though, you don't want to clean every time with soap and water, because now you have pH balances that are all out of whack and so forth. So using a disposable wipe that's a quality product to just, wipe in between would probably be a better solution than not at all. But yeah, you want to clean. You just want to make sure that you're using good products to do that cleaning. I know, again, you don't want to clean in the sense of soap and water with every change. That's going to have the skin break down.
And with my mom, I had to use sensitive skin wipes, but even those would sometimes, they'd have some kind of fragrance or some kind of chemical or something she would react to. And so I would just use the water wipes, or sometimes I found the wipes that she could handle were infant wipes. So they weren't as big, but they worked better for her. So I was just always trying to find, that works. So don't give up is the idea, is try different things until you find something that works.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. We have a big package of what we call premium wipes, and I call them my big FF, right? Like your big favorite friend that my best friend forever type of thing, BFF. That's how because they're fragrance free. Exactly. But they're big. So you can actually, we have folks that will say, oh, I like these because I don't have to use so many of them on mom and dad, so yeah, but you
have bigger ones.
Yeah. You're right though. You've got to find what works
for you and where you can get it and all of that. Now, I wanted to ask you what people can do to improve their level of continence. And I like the fact that you talk about continence more than you talk about incontinence, but you want to improve the level of continence that you have. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I would suggest that people, if they haven't already, create like a 3-day bladder diary where they can write what is their loved one eating, drinking, when are they using the bathroom, how much are they voiding, is it urine, is it a bowel movement? But then they can actually take that bladder diary at their next physician visit and ask their clinician to take a peek at it. That clinician might be able to say, oh, let's pull back on this, or, oh, I didn't realize maybe this script is, causing this. That can help improve continence. Also,
that was a very important piece of what we did.
Yeah, I think it's super important. As people get older and have incontinence, maybe doing an every 2-hour timed void. So you are looking at your watch outside of sleeping. We want people to sleep at night and get good restorative sleep. But during the day, it could be, let's go try. And maybe you as the caregiver, you're going too, and just say, I'm going to be proactive, right? So every 2 hours looking at the clock can make a difference. Something that we work with a geriatrician, Dr. Rosemary Laird, who has just years and years of experience helping older adults who have dementia and caregivers. Her heart is with the caregivers. She shared this tip one time, and I thought, oh my goodness, what a great tip. I don't know if I would have thought of this, but for us, the folks that are married or have partners, and I may sleep on the left side of the bed and my spouse may sleep on the right side of the bed, and we may have been doing this for 30 years. Well, all of a sudden, if I'm the person who is incontinent or has bladder leaks, if the bathroom is closer to my spouse's side, you may want to think about, wait a minute, that could be an easy fix. Could we switch sides of the bed? Could I sleep closer because I could get there closer? So that's another tip that can help improve things. Also, for people that have dementia and they're using products, instead of putting a package of products on top of a dresser or in a closet, caregivers may want to think about, let me pull those out of the package and let me help my loved one by putting them in the drawer. And that may feel, and you say, well, how does that help someone improve their level of incontinence? Well, it may help that person who could have potential challenges with different behaviors because of the dementia say, oh, this feels normal, what I'm used to. Let me put on my pull-up in the morning. I'm going to get dressed. And so that can eliminate an accident that may otherwise be caused by a different behavioral challenge. So
yeah, that's actually a really good point, because caregivers will bring up the fact that, my loved one doesn't want to use those things because that makes them feel old, or it makes them, it's different. But if you put them in the drawer where the underwear was, and that's what they can use, maybe it will feel a little bit more normal and not like you have big bags of incontinence supplies all over the bathroom.
Correct. And you bring up a good point you just triggered too. Just because most people that have incontinence, especially those with dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, those, they tend to lean towards brief pull-up. So a lot of caregivers are familiar with brief pull-up, but there are also other different types of products. There's what they call a shaped pad, and that can be used with someone's own underwear. So someone who says, I don't want to wear one of those, I'm not comfortable with a brief or a pull-up. Well, you know what? How about we try a shape pad in your own underwear, and that can feel more typical. I use that word, more typical for them, or different types of what they call liners, not liners to go into products, but liners or pads that can be worn as standalone. And then for males, we have out there what we call our Seni Man line. Someone who has prostate cancer, there's what they call a fit guard, which is very discreet and work super well. So you could have a gentleman who's in their 50s, 60s, and they want to go back to work after prostate cancer surgery, or go back golfing, and they want to say, oh, I don't want to worry, but I don't want to wear a pull-up. That doesn't feel right for me. This could be an option. So my point being, there are options in addition to what people are very familiar with, pull-ups and briefs.
That's such a good point. And I think it used to be that the pads that you could use in your own underwear were not quite as absorbent, and so people felt the only choice was the briefs. But now there's a much more wider array of products available, and so maybe if they're resisting wearing the disposable briefs or the pull-ups, try a pad instead and see if they can wear that with their regular underwear. I love that idea.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so what if someone is on the subject of resistance, and you've tried several approaches to try and deal with this incontinence, how do you deal with that? When you feel like you've hit the wall?
Yeah, I think you keep trying different strategies. So if you are always kind of fast forwarding of, well, what if, but as an example, let's say you're caring for someone and you know that they're soiled, right? But they don't see that they're soiled. Instead of saying, gee, mom, you had an accident, let's go change. I'm going to help you. That could be a trigger for someone to say, I'm not soiled. I'm fine. I'm not going, right? And then you could get into a match back and forth, and you don't want to get into that. So it could be different ways of saying, gee, mom, I'm thirsty. Can you come with me into the kitchen? Oh, you know what? Let's stop in the bathroom on our way and let's clean up, the two of us. Just different triggers to help your loved one. People are going to know their loved ones better than anybody else. So I think you have to keep trying different strategies. And if one works, try it again. And maybe it works for a while, and then all of a sudden you wonder, well, gee, that worked for a few weeks, but it doesn't work, any longer. But I think if people come from a place of help and togetherness, let's do this together, I think you tend to have better results.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've known people who have worn the pull-ups themselves to show their loved one that I wear them. It's perfectly comfortable. And they wear them, so they can show them. Maybe they don't wear them all the time. Or like you say, I like the idea of, okay, I can't get my loved one out of their chair to go to the bathroom on their schedule, but they're motivated by food. So I can say, okay, let's go to the kitchen and get a snack or lunch. And then on the way, by the way, we're stopping in the bathroom. Try to look at behaviorally what will work for them. I know like many people who have incontinence, they'll do anything to prevent having an accident. So they're fine to go to the bathroom. And sometimes they swing the other direction. One of the people in the Facebook group said their loved one is so anxious about it. They want to go to the bathroom like 50, 100 times a day. They're just constantly wanting to go to the bathroom to prevent being incontinent. And that's a problem too.
Yeah.
Because that's not healthy and obviously causing anxiety and exhausting. So you have to kind of figure out, okay, can I give some facts to this person? Most people need to use the bathroom every 2 hours. Let's set a timer. And when that timer goes off, that's the time. And you have a clock in front of them so they can see the timer hasn't gone off yet. You just have to get so creative and try different ways of dealing with the behaviors around incontinence.
Agreed. And the other point too, when someone uses a high quality, high performing product, the amount of product changes in a 24-hour period that is typical is just 3 or 4 product changes. So if you have a loved one who tends to get very stressed when the topic of being changed, is, you think if you're changing someone 7, 8, 9, we hear these stories even more, right? It can be better for both parties. Let's reduce all of that stress that may come along with it. And for someone who has their faculties, feeling confident in the product that they're wearing can make a huge difference. Okay, I'm going to be okay. I trust this product. So those things come into play as well.
Absolutely. Let's talk about UTIs, urinary tract infections. This is one of, again, one of the most common topics dealing in the group, both men and women, but more so with older women. And it's partly a problem because many older women, they don't feel the burning or the urge or some of those things. It's just anatomically, you don't have to have dementia or anything. You just don't, it just changes as you get older and don't realize you have an infection until it gets really bad. So what are the things in terms of incontinence supplies and dealing with incontinence that you can do to help prevent urinary tract infections?
Yeah. So I would say, I'll get that in 2 seconds, but really important to stay hydrated, keep everything moving through the system. For someone that, what I've noticed when it comes to products, and it's what I call little known secrets. So my teammates and I, we do a lot of conferences, and we talk to a lot of wound ostomy, continence nurses and administrators in communities and so forth. But when someone voids in a product, so a brief, if you picture a brief, that inner core of a brief has a layer, and that layer, sometimes it's colored so people can actually see it. Sometimes it's just under, it could be all white, but that layer is what they call an ADL, an acquisition distribution layer. And what that means is when someone voids, that urine is going to spread long and wide and give a person a feeling of dryness if they're in a good product, because it's going into the product and it's being wicked away with what we call cellulose pulp and polymers. I use the example, if you took, people can usually relate to, if you took a cup and you put cotton balls in it, and all of a sudden you poured water, right? That cotton ball would immediately absorb that water. But if you didn't have a gelling mechanism to lock it, that water would come out again in the cup. So you need both cellulose pulp and polymers, but that acquisition distribution layer is what spreads that urine long and wide. So if someone were to pull that layer up, high quality, high performing products like Seni, and there are some others on the market, will not have a plastic acquisition distribution layer. Ours are what they call a soft non-woven. You can feel it. And what that means is you don't have urine microscopically pooling. And so women have shorter urethras. And if you have a plastic acquisition distribution layer, you can have microscopic pooling. Bacteria in that urine can go back into the urethra, go back into the bladder. And here we go round robin with a UTI. Lots of doctors, no ill will. It's just lack of acquisition, lack of education, because who's going around pulling, hey, let's pull them up. But we are now, because we're very in tune with, boy, we can change a lot of outcomes in relation to UTIs. So we do pull it up and show people. But when you don't have that plastic, the risk of a UTI is reduced. If you do have that plastic, you're increasing risk of that happening. A doctor can write a script. Okay, the antibiotics are going to kick it out for a little bit. But if you're sitting in that same product again, we go round robin, UTI. And then you hear about people that have delirium, and then that leads to sepsis. I mean, it can go on and on with ugly outcomes. So features of a product can lead to reduced risk of an ugly outcome and a better outcome. So paying attention, and it's hard too, right? Because if people are buying products in a big box store, a grocery store, there's so many choices, right? And gee, what am I looking for? How do I do that? So we suggest for someone who's deep in the weeds, really having challenges, go to an independent pharmacy and talk to that pharmacist. most likely they're going to be educated about high quality incontinence products. Go to a home medical supply store and get products there where people are educated about guidance to lead people to high performing products that work. At the end of the day, if you spend a little time on the front end, oh my goodness, better outcomes, which is fabulous for the person who's incontinent, fabulous for the caregiver, but it's just everyone breathes. We figured it out. We're breathing. And I think it keeps people home longer, because a UTI could lead to an admission to a hospital, and an admission to the hospital could lead someone having to transition into a community versus staying at home. So I think it's super important to understand that. But that's a no plastic backing on the acquisition distribution.
So how can people figure this out? They should take the product they have and basically take it apart. And where should it not be plastic? And
yeah,
it should be plastic to keep it from leaking out the bottom of the product.
No, high quality products are constructed in such a way that you don't need a plastic outer backing.
And that lets air circulate more.
Correct. The breathability
helps prevent the infections.
Correct. It's the cellulose pulp and the polymers that are keeping the liquid in there. But if they were to open up a brief or a pull up, pour some water, it makes it easier. And then just pull up that cord. They might have to tug a little bit, but they will typically see a rectangular shape of, ooh, what is this? That's that acquisition distribution layer that sits just under the product, and they'll be able to, you'll actually can feel it. You can feel the difference you'll
see that it's not covered in plastic.
Correct. If you'll feel that what we call a soft non-woven, and you can actually, it just feels soft and it feels the same on the front as it does on the back. Some of the different acquisition distribution layer, they may feel soft, and you flip it over and say, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That feels like it's got plastic there. So if you stay away from those types of things, it can help. And again, the independent pharmacies, home medical supply stores, we have a customer service line. I mean, other manufacturers out there, if you stay educated and ask for help, help me, understand type of thing, you'll probably find that guidance that
the right thing. And we as caregivers learn from each other a great deal. This is a topic very near and dear to my heart, because my mother had chronic urinary tract infection, and she passed away when one went septic very quickly. And she had such resistance to the antibiotics because she'd been on so many, and she'd been septic before and got through it. But when she passed, she was 87, and she didn't pull out of that one. So I always urge people, not that I was not ignoring, I was diligent about it, but it was my dad's birthday, and so I put off calling the doctor a day. I will never know if that made a difference or not. It might not have made a difference, but it might have gotten her on an antibiotic sooner. So I was just saying, if you suspect a UTI, do not wait. Don't hesitate. Get it tested, get it treated, do what you can. But I wish I had known this when I was caring for her, because I don't really remember. I don't know if the products we were using had a breathable acquisition distribution layer. That's right.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's something that I urge everybody to check. Get your products, tear them apart, or read. Does it say breathable? Correct? Will it say
it would be, the product itself, you want to be fully breathable, 100% breathable. Sometimes you can see packaging that might say breathable wings, or 360 degree breathability. You want to make sure a package says fully breathable, 100% breathable as an umbrella. What I'm talking about with this acquisition distribution layer is no plastic backing on it. That's where the trouble can start. No plastic backing on it. Yeah.
What are the other things we need to look for when choosing incontinence supplies?
Yeah. Sizing is super important. A lot of people, and this would be myth, a lot of people think, oh, well, if I give someone, my height and weight, then they can, pick a product based on height and weight. We find hips and waist are a better measurement. And so we've got sizing charts to have people in the right size. Absorbency, a larger size has nothing to do with absorbency. It's not going to absorb anymore because someone's got an extra large versus a medium. Sizing is critical. Absorbency is critical. Not everybody needs a product that's for someone who's the most severely incontinent. Some people might have moderate incontinence. Some might have light. So absorbency levels. So sizing, absorbency levels, inner leak guards is a big deal. And what I mean by that, whether it's a pull-up or a brief, when you open that product up, and opening a product can be referred to as activating a brief. Make sure that when you're opening a package, manufacturing, regardless of brand, we want to pack everything as tight as we can, get it into the package, get it into the box, get it into trucks, get it into the shelf. But it's just like buying I compare it to almost buying a men's shirt that's in that wrapping. You don't want to just open it up from the package and put it in, say, hey, put it on, right? You're opening it up, you're stretching it out, you're letting it have some air to it. It's the same with a product. Open it up. And then inside, look for a product that has inner leak guards for two reasons. Most leaks happen on the sides. So if you have inner leak guards, you're preventing leaks. Okay, great. That's what we're trying to do. Well, preventing leaks, what does that mean? Well, that means that you'll have less soiled garments. You'll have less sheets to change. You'll have someone who can sleep through the night. What is that? Well, if they sleep through the night, they don't get up. If they don't get up, they can't fall. They can't end up at the ER. So it ripples. But also, urine on its own does not have an odor. It's when it mixes, right, with the air. So if we are wicking it away because of those leak guards, you're minimizing that urine odor too. So I would look for full breathability, correct style and fit, correct absorbency level, soft non-wovens. You want something that feels comfortable. People with dementia, if that doesn't feel comfortable, they may rip it off. I don't want to wear this stuff, but if it feels comfortable. So those are the types of things that I would encourage people to look and try. Most quality manufacturers like Seni, and there are others out there too, will offer free samples. Try them. See if they work. See if they're the right size. Try them. I would encourage
that idea. Yeah, we all love free samples, but you're right. I think that's the hard thing. Sometimes you'll buy a whole package of things and then you're like, this isn't the right product for us. It's not the right style. It's not the right type. When do you want a pull-up versus a tabbed brief?
Yeah. So as a general statement, I would say that more active people are going to fare better with a pull-up. People that are more immobile, bed-bound, are going to fare better with a brief. It also ties in to level of incontinence because, for example, we have an overnight product for someone who has heavy incontinence. So we have a pull-up for that. We also have a brief for that. But if someone became even more incontinent, our most absorbent product of them all, which is called our Seni Super Quattro Brief, very few people actually need that level. That's how good a Seni Super Plus product is going to do. But if you need that level, that's only going to come in a brief. So you have to pay attention.
That was a tricky thing with my dad because he was able to stand, and it was easiest for us to change his pull up while he was sitting on the toilet, and then he would stand up and hold on to the grab bar, and we would pull up his pants and things. So we really didn't want a tabbed brief because that's, for me, was very hard to put on standing up.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't going to happen for us to put it on him lying down. And so I ended up putting extra pads in the pull up, but I didn't really have, we're looking almost 10 years ago now. There's a lot more available now. So
Right.
do your homework, try different products. I think that's such an important thing to say. Now let's talk about the odor, because this comes up a lot. And this is one of the things that makes it so hard.
Mm.
And one of our questions from the Facebook group is, how can I get the smell of urine out of the clothing and the bed sheets and everything? You mentioned that urine doesn't have an odor till it hits the air.
Mm-hmm.
Is one issue, but we talk about how do we do everything we can. I use a lot of washable pads on the bed or on the chair where my loved ones were sitting. And that was great because I could put 3 layers of them or whatever. But also, I would use vinegar in the laundry. That would help sometimes for light urine, that would help. And then I would use OxyClean. Someone had told me, try OxyClean, some type of a non-chlorine bleach that really helps that. I know some of the group members say they use some kind of an odor guard, something they spray on it or put in the laundry that helps with odor. Any other thoughts about dealing with odor?
I think you've covered in that particular area for when it comes to laundry and washing and so forth. I think you've got more expertise in that area than I do. I would just say if you start with a good product, you will reduce it, because you shouldn't have soiled sheets, soiled garments, all of that goes away and right away. That's a decrease. Even, it's interesting. A lot of people, you brought up underpads, right? Some people wear disposable or have underpads that are disposable, and some have underpads that are washable. When I talked about early on that I was a nurse's aide, one of the things I remember when we rounded, they were washable, and we would roll those on one side and then roll that resident on the other side and then pull it out. But it was with every change, right? It was habit. That's what we did. We recommend with a high performing product like Seni, you shouldn't need underpads with every change. We say one per 24-hour period, and really just for hygiene, not overflow. Things have changed in the incontinence product industry as a whole. Better products, you don't need those underpads. And so you think of it, if you prior had a product that leaks and you're using an underpad for overflow, you can have the actual product that has urine odor. You can now have that underpad with urine odor. If that doesn't work and it goes onto the sheets and the garment and the person, you've got a lot of materials in various pieces and parts. You use a good product with inner leak guards that's reducing all that, and it's wicking away and it's doing its job really, really well. A lot of that odor goes away.
Yeah. You do still have the issue of the disposable briefs, pull-ups, pads, that once they're full, how do you deal with that? So a lot of people say, I don't want to walk in my home and smell urine, even if it's just from those, not from leakage.
Yeah.
And, there are various things where I've seen kind of like they call them diaper pails, where you put the used diaper in there and it's very well sealed so it doesn't get to smell, and sometimes it compresses them. We just put, plastic trash bags in our trash can, and I would save the plastic little grocery bags from the grocery store or the drugstore or wherever. Sure. And if it was a particularly bad one, bad smell, I would put it in that, close it, tie it up, put it in the trash, and we emptied the trash every day, sometimes twice a day, and just took it out to the trash can.
Yep.
So I think the key is getting on top of it quickly, not letting it sit around too much. And you can look at different products in terms of we had trash cans with lids that made a big difference.
Yeah.
I think that made a big difference in keeping the smell out. So try things like that. Share in the comments what has worked for you. Again, it's all about practical, trial and error and what happens. The other thing I was going to say about odor is that we have a question from the Facebook group saying, I just can't deal with it. Even if it's not, really awful smells, whatever, I can't deal with any smells. So what do I do? And you know what I used to do, especially with bowel, stuff, I would put a little bit of Vicks under my nose. And the smell of that Vicks kind of, or mentholatum would, help mitigate what I was smelling in terms of what was in the room.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I had some really good air fresheners that I would spritz that I wasn't allergic to, and, all of that. And so people, a lot of people talk about that. The other big thing is having a good exhaust fan in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And if you don't have one, that's something, look into getting one installed by, a licensed contractor, because that can really help carry the odor out when you're in the bathroom helping your loved one. So I think that's another really important thing.
Yeah. And it may be time too, just for yourself as the caregiver, maybe that's the trigger. When we had talked, you had asked before, different strategies and so forth of, gee, how do you be a good caregiver overall when it can be frustrating and challenging? That could be a good thing where if, you go out back and take a 5 minute, I need out here. I want to breathe fresh air. I want to look at the nice, pretty grass and the trees and take a 5-minute break for yourself. You'd be amazed how coming back in through the door, all can be good in the world again.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to do the things that work for us, try different things. Any other tips you want to share, Deanna? You've been amazing.
Well, thank you. No, I guess I just want to share that I think it takes a village to break down stigmas and taboo subjects like incontinence that's been around for a long time. So I would just encourage more people to, it's a condition, and to me, it's a health condition. So keep talking about it when you need to talk about it. Keep seeking out resources. And as caregivers, my common ground with people would be, I hope everybody has a good day. Get up in the morning with a restart. Let's just make it a good day and go from there. But I'm grateful to be here, Amy. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think you just provide so much wealth of information. I mean, you're like an encyclopedia. So I understand why there are so many folks that tune into your podcast here. But I'm grateful to be here, and thank you
so much for taking the time. And those of you who are watching, Deanna has a podcast, and you can watch it. You can go to the YouTube channel for her organization, Seni, and you can watch it there. I will post clickable links in the comments so that you can click right on it. And I'm sure every episode of your podcast has some kind of a new revelation and something new to learn, because as you pointed out, these things are constantly changing. There's new products coming out all the time, new knowledge, new experience. So it's really important to keep up on it and know that even, my father passed away in 2018, and there's a lot more available now than there was even then.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Deanna.
Thank you so much.
And take care, all of you who are watching. Thank you for watching. If you're not already a member of the AARP Family Caregivers discussion group on Facebook, please join us, and we will see you next time.